Director for Americans for Prosperity Foundation, or as most of you know me, the guy who sent you all those emails. Well, in a few minutes, we're going to hear from another guy who sent you a lot of emails, our President, Tim Phillips. But before we do that, let's keep our priorities straight. And please welcome some folks who were recognized at our National Defending the American Dream Summit, which in Florida, which you just saw up there. And they were recognized as our AFP Activists of the Year, Bob and Tempe Lyons from O'Fallon, Illinois. Here to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So please stand.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thanks, Bob and Tempe. I'm so glad that so many of you could be here today, and there's a lot of you still coming. We had over 400 people successfully register for this event online. Maybe the federal government could learn a thing or two. In fact, I think more people registered for this summit than have successfully signed up for healthcare.gov. Possibly. Some of you might want to check that. Although if we were actually trying to emulate the federal government and the administration, we would have sold you your ticket for $25 and then charged your card $100. But my guess is that you're here because you care about your nation and about your state. And you probably are gravely concerned about the direction that both are headed in, because we're really concerned too. We're holding this event to help inspire you with dynamic speakers and equip you with the information and tactics you need to take back our nation and the land of Lincoln. As the name of this summit says, Restore Illinois Summit, our goal is to restore Illinois to its rightful role as the economic engine of the Midwest. I'm tired of Illinois being the punchline for late-night TV shows, or the whipping boy of the Wall Street Journal editorial board, and rightly so. This is not the land of Obama and Durbin and Madigan. It's the land of Lincoln. It's the place where Reagan was raised and his values were formed. It's a place that for over a century embodied American innovation and entrepreneurship. It's home to some of the greatest universities, some of the greatest corporations, some of the greatest farmland, and most importantly, some of the greatest people in the world. But we need to put an end to the bad policies that have put Illinois on the brink of fiscal ruin, with the second highest unemployment rate in the nation, and this year presents us a real opportunity to turn away from those policies. Also, we in Illinois, we bear a certain responsibility for what's happening to our great nation. I mean, we first sent this president to Washington, and he has taken the bad Chicago and Illinois policies with him and implemented it on a national scale. It's incumbent for us, especially, to work against those policies of overspending, of higher taxes, and to make a statement to the nation by rejecting those policies right here in the president's home state. We can make a real statement to the rest of the nation. Well, we're going to have a great day in store for you. Not only are there inspiring national and Illinois speakers, but you'll have an opportunity to attend breakout sessions and learn more about some of the important issues facing our state and our nation, and receive some practical training on ways to hold elected officials accountable. We also have 20 organizations exhibiting right outside there. Please visit them and find out what they're up to and what their missions are, because they share our mission. Now, I'm really honored to introduce a guy who really is one of the great leaders in the fight for economic freedom. And I'm not saying that just because he's my boss. He's led Americans for Prosperity Foundation for, I think it's 8 years now. And he appears on TV news frequently. He meets with some of the most successful business leaders in the nation to discuss the fight for economic freedom. And he leads staff in 36 states as president of AFP. Yet when I think of Tim Phillips, I think of an activist leader. He's often found and most comfortable rallying activists at a phone bank, going door to door with a couple of local folks, or pumping up a crowd in front of a bus in a parking lot. Tim just traveled, woke up at 4 in the morning morning to fly out here to be with us this morning, and then he's got to go right back to keep working for economic freedom. He's a humble leader who's guided AFP to become the nation's largest and leading grassroots organization fighting for economic freedom with over 2.2 million activists nationwide. Join me in welcoming a man who's one of the most tireless champions of economic freedom, AFP Foundation President Tim Phillips.
Imagine if you're in the private sector, and imagine if someone gives you a budget of $623 million and 3 years lead time. And they say, hey, design just a basic website that can let folks shop. I think some people have probably done this before, Expedia, Kayak, Geico, Allstate e-insurance. About 6,000 or 8,000 or 20,000 private sector companies have done this for probably 1/20th of the amount we're going to give you, and certainly in much less time. And then imagine the federal government going out and doing what it did, starting up from the wheel. And here's the question: are you surprised by that? No, of course not. We're not surprised by that. And the message we've got for America right now, we're out there we have ads on the air in a half dozen states right now. We're determined to make sure that we don't just focus on this disastrously incompetent bureaucratic email of this government website that doesn't work. We want to make sure that folks understand this is just the tip of the iceberg, right? If they can't get a basic website right, can they get the insurance right down the road when the people are actually having to live under those policies? When millions more Americans are dumped on the Medicaid, which is currently a failing federal program, millions more are heading that way to a program that's already failing. Over the last year, we proposed Medicaid expansion in every state in the country. There are 25 states thus far, 24, we did lose in Ohio, it's very tough to defeat. 24 states have said no to Medicaid expansion. And you want to know the message that really has driven that? It wasn't just the cost message, and that's what I want to share with you this morning. The cost message is important to share with our fellow Americans. The fact that it costs more money, it's money we don't have, there's no such thing as free money from Washington, D.C. We all know that, right? We know that. But there's a moral message as well. And we've been sharing that in state after state. We were just in Florida about 8 days ago, and there they refused to expand Medicaid in the face of intense pressure from the left. But here's the moral argument for not expanding Medicaid. The University of Virginia Medical School, one of the most acclaimed medical schools in the country, and the Cardiology Association of America, heart doctors in fact, they did detailed studies of life outcomes, how people do when they're facing two of the biggest killers that we face, heart disease and cancer. And they compared people with private insurance to those on Medicaid. Now, not surprisingly, people with private insurance, we know that's better. They did better by far. It was a dramatic increase in life expectancy, almost double basically, between those who were stuck on Medicaid and those who had private insurance. That's to be expected. Then both studies compared people on Medicaid with folks on Medicare. Now there you would think it's a more reasonable comparison because Medicare are older Americans, right? Folks on Medicare still had a dramatic increase in life expectancy when facing heart disease or cancer over those on Medicaid. Here's the kicker. They compared Americans on Medicaid with those who have no insurance at all and simply show up at an emergency room with later stage symptoms. I mean, imagine when you realize with your heart, or with cancer especially, that you have symptoms. That's usually the worst time, and you're showing up at an emergency room with no health insurance at all. Folks with no health insurance at all showing up at an emergency room facing cancer and heart disease had a longer life expectancy than people on Medicare. Now think about what that means, and think about what the left's argument is the next time they tell you that they're the compassionate Americans and we're not, or they're the moral folks and somehow we're not. They have a program in which Americans are trapped. They usually and often cannot get access to good doctors and good specialists. There are some good ones in the system, I'm not suggesting otherwise, but there simply aren't enough because the government price controls. And we know what happens when the government controls prices. The market doesn't. So the providers leave because they're not getting honest wages, honest payment for their work. And that's what's happening in Medicaid. And so the moral thing to do, the compassionate thing to do, is to say no to dumping millions more Americans on a program that is causing them to die at a higher, faster rate than two of the biggest killers that we face in heart disease and cancer. And that's the argument we've got to keep making across the country on this issue of Obamacare. It's not just a fouled up, boondoggable website, although that's a symptom. It's the fact that that is simply the beginning. Imagine when they're actually executing and implementing the policies that people are able to sign up and sign. Imagine when they're actually, between you and your doctor or your specialist or your nurse or the treatment you need. That's what's coming next, and that's what we've got to keep this fight up. And remember a promise the president made during the campaign for Obamacare? Remember what it was? If you like your health care, your health insurance, you can keep it, right? Well, we put together a montage. This goes up, I think, Monday in a number of states and online as well. You want to see it? Take a look at this right back.
You heard President Obama say this for months. If you like your health care plan, if you like your doctor, you can keep it.
Promise made repeatedly. If you like your plan, you can keep it.
President Obama has given repeated assurances about Americans being able to keep current plans.
If you like your private health insurance plan, you can keep it. If you like the plan you have, you can keep it. If you like your health care plan, you'll be able to keep your health care plan.
Millions of Americans who purchase individual plans are finding out that is not true.
We're learning that may not necessarily be true.
Millions of Americans will have their plans canceled, whether they like it or not.
They are getting cancellation letters saying those plans don't meet the new Obamacare standards. The White House knew for years that this promise would not be true.
These regulations were known by the president in July of 2010.
We will keep this promise to the American people.
We just want to help Americans remember. We want to make sure they remember the promises that were made on Obamacare. Here's our view of Obamacare and Americans for Prosperity. Repealing it is a long-term effort. It's going to involve several things. One, continuing to have a conversation with the American people over the impact of Obamacare on them and on their loved ones. We've got to have this conversation. We're committed to doing that. We're going to continue online with ads like that across the country. We're determined to see this law repealed. We do think it's going to take a long time. I wish there was a better answer. I wish the leverage was there to get it done right now. And I applaud every effort that can be made. We think it's a long-term effort. And we're going to stay at this. We think it necessarily involves elections. You know, there are senators in this country right now who are up next year who would cast a decisive vote for Obamacare. Whether it's Senator Pryor in Arkansas, Senator Franken in Minnesota, or Senator Landreau in Louisiana, or Senator Hagan in North Carolina. There are senators who were the 60th and decisive vote. We're on the air right now in North Carolina and Louisiana, holding accountable those two senators. Because we want Americans to remember who brought this disaster on them. We want to make sure that, candidly, what happened in 2012 doesn't happen in 2012. The issue of Obamacare did drift off the radar screen, right? It did. And it's a presidential year, I get that. There's a lot of personalities involved and politics involved. Our job, though, is to make sure in 2014 that Obamacare is the #1 issue, foremost in the minds of individual Americans. And the impact it's having on their loved ones, the people they love, whether it's a 35-year-old mom or dad with kids they're worried about and the treatments and the insurance for them, or frankly, if it's our grandparents, my grandparents, who are in their 90s now. We want to make sure, or in their late 80s, I guess, we want to make sure that that is what's in the very forefront of the minds of Americans. We're committed to doing that. Now, Illinois. I was at the airport this morning talking to one of our activists, and she said, well, where are you headed this morning? It was early. She was on a flight heading back to Virginia, where our offices are. And I said, I'm going to Illinois. She goes, Illinois? Is it for a football game? Maybe. I like the Bears. They're a pretty interesting team. Cutler got hurt. Hopefully we recovers quickly. But no, I'm going because we have a vibrant operation in Illinois. She went, really? Conservatism in Illinois? Are you sure? You're going to Illinois. It's not Indiana? No? Let me tell you why we're here. In January of 2005, I the shores of Lake Michigan in Milwaukee. And it was in January. Now, I know the accent fooled you, but I'm Southern. Apparently, it's really cold in January on the shores of Lake Michigan. I didn't know that, being a Southerner. It was about 190 below zero. It was April before I thawed out. But we kicked off Americans for Prosperity Wisconsin that January day, 2005. We had our new state director, Dave Frum's equivalent then, myself, and 14 intrepid grassroots activists showed up that day. And look, Wisconsin in 2005, if you go back and look, was as liberal and as big government as blue as it gets, right? And in 2005, we started building. 2006, we started building. We did our first event at the Capitol. I'll never forget it, in Madison in 2006. We had like 400 people show up. That was exciting. During the budget battle, we got killed there. The elections were a disaster in 06 and 08. I mean, a complete disaster. Go back and look at the numbers. You'll see what I mean. A disaster. Things didn't get any better. We got hammered in the budget fight in 2009. I remember that very clearly. I was there. But by 2010, it turned. And it wasn't a magical moment. It wasn't some eureka moment that turned it. It was simply years of grinded out organizational work, of fundraising, of reaching out person to person, of building a genuine organization. By the way, I'm not speaking of just Americans for Prosperity. I'm thinking about the entire movement on our side. It involved great candidates. And obviously, Governor Scott Walker is one of them. Isn't he a great governor? He's one of the best governors. But it involved years of simply building and working. And candidly, a lot of times it wasn't flashy. But it was effective. It took years. And we suffered grievous defeats 2 or 3 years into it. I mean, you were talking about the birthplace of progressivism, of liberal progressivism, right? This is Wisconsin. That's what most of the historians will tell you. The birthplace of local government employee unions, Wisconsin. It's a tough place. And so it took years there. Think about Michigan for just a moment. Did you ever think you would see right to work pass in Michigan? Think about that for a minute. Just go back and just try to go back 4 or 5 years. No, 2 years ago. And say, I predict they're going to pass right to work in Michigan. No one will believe it. We launched in Michigan in 2006, April of 2006. I was there that day as well, very well. It took years. And again, I'm not speaking of just Americans for Prosperity. It took years to build a movement. We're part of a movement, so I want to make sure I'm not somehow saying, oh, we're the reason. We're part of it. It took years in Michigan to get to a point where there was a legislature willing to stand up to the unions, to try to get the economy in Michigan going again from the basket case it had become, in part because of the union stranglehold on work and freedom and everything else there. And then it took years to get a governor who would sign that legislation. I mean, we were there in December during all the debate. You probably saw the coverage. We had a large tent set up. We rented. It's about $30,000. These things are expensive tent with all the audio-visual equipment. And we were doing rallies every day on the Capitol. Our state director, Dave's equivalent there, his guy Scott Hagerstrom, was there. We had our activists come because we wanted to show the legislators, because there were tens of thousands of union members. You remember the footage. And we wanted to show, hey, they're also people supporting what you're doing. And they're not being paid to be here. They're just here to say, do the right thing, pass right to work. And you may remember the coverage of the union people swarming into our tent, taking box cutters and cutting it, tearing it down with people inside it, and destroying all the audio-visual equipment. I know you're going to be shocked to hear this, but the police at the Capitol in Lansing decided there wasn't really any grounds for prosecuting them. $40,000. But years after it started in Michigan, we now have right to work in that state. Things aren't perfect, but we have right to work in that state. We have some basic budget reforms there that are working. That didn't happen in a eureka moment. It happened because our movement was disciplined. We were driven over the long term to work and build and organize, to learn how to deliver our messages, and to be able to finally take on the other side and beat them in pitch fights. And it took years. I think about Indiana. Now, Indiana Indiana's a little bit, it's a little easier. The history there is a bit more conservative. I know that. But even there, we launched a year and a half ago because we thought that Indiana was under-leveraged. Even though it was relatively a conservative state, policy-wise, it was lagging. And today you have right to work in Indiana. And you have early this year, Governor Mike Pence, another great conservative reform-minded governor. You're going to hear a lot more about him in coming years as well. He passed the our movement, and Governor Pence signed into law, the largest tax cut in Indiana history. And again, there was no eureka moment. There wasn't some kind of magical mistake the other side made or something our side did that was so brilliant no one had thought of before. It was just years of grinding it out and building a movement organization. And I'm telling you something, that's what we're committed to do with you, as a partner with you in Illinois. We're going to do that. It may take a while. I don't know, I think it is. It's going to take a while. It's going to take a while, I know that. By the way, it may blow up and happen this next fall. Who knows? I think it'll take a while. But I'm telling you, we're committed to being here. We're committed to working with you. We're committed to working with Tea Party groups and business groups and frankly, anyone who wants to be an ally in this fight for economic freedom and prosperity. I remember Ronald Reagan, who was my hero, saying that an 80% friend is not a 20% enemy. And so I remember Jean Kirkpatrick. Remember her, the great Cold Warrior under the Reagan administration? I remember her saying that. I always get her quote wrong, but basically she said, we're going to look for people who want to work with us, even if they don't always agree with us on every issue. But we're going to seek friends and allies who simply want economic freedom and prosperity and a chance for people to make it and live the American dream. And we're going to build here, and I'm telling you, this state is going to snap back. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. Look, maybe in like 8 years, okay, here's an interesting, here's a great, maybe in 5 years, I'll be in Boston, Massachusetts. And I'll be standing at an event like this and I'll say, and remember back in 2013, in November the 2nd, I was in, of all places, Chicago, Illinois, or Rosemont, Illinois. We had a group of probably 100 folks, and we really committed ourselves to renewing the fight in that state. Look what happened over the last 2 years. Wouldn't that be kind of cool to be in Massachusetts doing that? Okay, maybe Massachusetts is kind of a big dream. I think you guys are in a lot better shape than they are. That's for darn sure. I think maybe we're not quite ready for that one yet. But we're committed to it and we're committed to it. And we're glad you're here. I think it's going to be an exciting day. I'm interested to hear these candidates for governor this afternoon. I'm interested to see what they have to say. You've also got some other great folks. Michelle Mawkins, one of my favorite people. Come on fire. I can't wait to have Michelle here this afternoon. And you guys are the early arrivals. That's what I love about you. You got here early. You got some breakfast in. You got down here by 9:15. So thank you for being here. What's that? No breakfast? Wait a minute, Dave. Where are the donuts, Dave? What's going on here? Wait a minute now. All right, I think we can fix the coffee front, okay? In fact, I know we can. I'll commit to that, and it's on me. How about that? I'll figure that one out. Get my word on that. For the next break. Maybe more than the next break. I can get the coffee fixed, absolutely. But thank you for being a part of this. And one last thing. When you're in some boardroom or you're in some planning session for any group, and you're talking about the grassroots, it all sounds so antiseptic, right? It's the grassroots, as if that's some amorphous term that just magically happens. Oh, the grassroots are doing that. Here's what the grassroots means, and you're part of it, and you know what it means. It means being in a Walmart parking lot at 10 a.m., getting walk sheets or an iPad and going out and doing it. That's what it means. That's what it really means, right? It means going over and eating sometimes cold pizza at night on a phone bank. It means going out to a rally or an event when the other side is going to have sometimes more people and more buses, and it's going to be tough, and it's going to be kind of gritty there at that event. That's what it really means. And I want to thank you for doing that. And one thing I always remind these political strategist types, whether it's at the Capitol and in the state or back east in Washington or wherever it is, when they talk about the grassroots, it's people like you who are sacrificing for the cause. You're taking the most precious commodity there is, which is time. If you think about it. Money know it's crazy, but Thursday night I went door to door. I was in Lynchburg, Virginia. There's a big governor's race there. We're doing nonpartisan voter turnout efforts there. We had about 21 people join us on a Thursday night. We met in the parking lot at a local university. And I looked around, and the person I got paired up with was a 24-year-old young lady, a graduate student. She worked in a local bakery, and then she went to graduate school as well, both in class and online. She had a 2-year-old child. Her husband was at home keeping the 2-year-old. And for fun, and that's a kind of a mild joke, she went out and walked door to door, and I got paired up with her for 3 hours. And I talked to her that night, and here was a young lady, 24, leaving a 2-year-old at home, and instead of going out and getting a spa treatment or going shopping, and those are great things, by the way, no issues with that, because my wife is listening, I don't know if she is or not, but in case she is, no problem at all there. Or if it's a guy or a guy or gal going fishing, those are great, going to the ball game, those are great things. She went out and went door to door for about almost 3 hours by the time it was over. And that's what you do. And I want to say thank you for that. And I want to say that if we are going to turn around Illinois, and if we are going to take our nation in a different direction, our activists are going to have to beat their activists. And that means you beating the other side. And there's no substitute for that. Look, honestly, we don't have a money problem. We can raise money at a clip, again, broadly speaking, that the left's raising money. On the technology front, they've had some advantages here and there, no question. They've learned how to take social media to a different level. There's no doubt about that. But candidly, it's close enough, and our side's getting better, and we're going to jump the leapfrog, and we're going to be fine on the technology data analytics front. The question is, can we match them on the ground in enough states, or in the big states like this, to simply beat them? And that's where you come. And that's really as simple as it is. An old mentor of mine said, political technology is ideologically neutral. It's the activists that determine how effective that technology in the end becomes. And so the question really comes down to, will our activists be able to beat their activists? And what I mean by that is being able to go out to our fellow Americans with our message and deliver it in a way that's, while maintaining integrity and principle, is at the same time effective in winning them over